without further ado, I'd love to introduce our next speaker, who is going to be sharing knowledge on rethinking career success in the new normal. All right, so we have Ericka Spradley, who is a career management strategist, and she does her best work when she's coaching women and partnering with organizations to develop, retain, and promote them. She, like most of us, had no idea the pandemic would have such profound impacts on women in the workplace. And as a result, Ericka has spent the last 18 plus months coaching women to care for themselves as they care for work during what we refer to as the new normal. And I can't wait to pick her brain about what she thinks about that. Ericka is the Chief Power Officer, founder of Confident Career Woman. She believes every woman should excel at work, but more importantly, that every woman should know her worth. This notion serves as a catalyst for her online career course platform, as well as her latest book, Confident Career Woman: Ditch Perfection, Play Bigger, and Make Power Moves. Welcome, Ericka. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Good. I'm great. And I get to hold the mic here and just, go away on some questions that I know are going to be super, super beneficial for our live callers here today. But before I dive into these questions, can you just let us know a little bit more about yourself? I know I gave that beautiful bio introduction, but what are you excited about today? Let people know who have not joined, one of your previous chats. Just let them know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So what I'm excited about today is that there is space for us to have this conversation about this new normal that appears to be, for most of us, right? Anything but normal. In terms of a little bit about myself, I'm originally from Virginia, but I currently reside in North Carolina. And in my spare time, I love to shop and eat. And spend time with family members and friends, but also do a little bit of traveling. I was in Mexico the week before last, treating myself to a luxury vacation with a private chef. So when we talk about this new normal and caring for yourself as you care for the work, it's so important for us to prioritize ourselves. So I'll just stop there.
Yes. Please let us know how we can get like you. I love that. Well, I'm sure that's what you unravel in your coaching anyway. And actually, this is just a great moment. Can you just shine a light on your career journey? What had you end up where you are today?
So my career journey, how much time do we have? How I got here, I started in retail. For people who I've never met before, who don't follow me online, I actually started in retail. And I found myself in my 30s saying, okay, well, what is it that I want to do? And I could not answer that question, but I knew what I did not want to do. And eventually I gave my then employer a 6-week notice, put my resume online, took all the money out of my 401k and went on vacation. And I didn't have another job to go to. So I was recruited into banking, having never worked in the industry before, didn't have my degree, courtesy of that leap of faith. And then I came to North Carolina for the first time and said, okay, I want to relocate. 18 months later, I relocated. And while working full time, I started my business, finished my undergraduate degree. Since starting the business, I have published 3 books. I became a college and career readiness adjunct professor, and I have my online course platform now at confidentcareerwoman.com.
Yes, and I see you just rocking the space. I love the content that you post. And of course, the deep, the rooted transformational process that you share within your coaching and consulting. So it's great. It shines through in your voice and the content that you're creating. So I really appreciate that. All right, so please tell us more about the full scope of this so-called new normal. What are the main changes in this professional culture that you've seen, the shift? If you can talk more about that shift.
Sure. With this new normal, what I've seen is a transferring of skill set to expand options in ways that people may not have considered before. So what's interesting is as the pandemic started, there were so many people who said, you know what, I just need to wait this out. I just need to sit still and see what happens because this is something that we've never experienced before. And I would ask myself, and I asked myself this question for an extended period of time, how many opportunities are people missing out on because they have decided to sit still? Even though the country shut down, opportunities opened up. So now, fast forward to where we are now, this is a time for us to not get so comfortable in the industries and seats that we have been in before, but to really look at our skill set and say, where are my skills needed? What is in demand so that I can expand my options and increase my salary? Those are the things that I have been seeing that we don't talk enough about because there's so much emphasis on the great resignation. But what is also happening at the same time is the great attraction. Employers are trying to bring in the best talent and retain the best talent that they have.
So I know that you probably, I mean, just as you took that leap of faith as far as your career journey is concerned, and then, the world hit you with like, okay, now it's in the media, this great resignation. Clearly people are needing what you're offering is. Can you just explain some of your personal, just reflect on how you felt personally when, all of this nuance came up with, people being uncomfortable or not feeling fulfilled in their job and looking to make some shifts, whether they be career pivots, and especially amongst Black women and just Black people in general. I would love to hear just your personal reflection. Were you like, yes, I'm glad I listened to myself, here's the next step? Or were you like, were you nervous? Did you feel some imposter syndrome? I would just love to hear your transparent reflection there.
That's a great question from a personal perspective and because of the work that I do with clients. So what happened for me personally when the pandemic hit, and a lot of people didn't know until I made this announcement, is that I was still working full time. I didn't leave my full-time job until December of 2020. So when the pandemic hit, I was still juggling, okay, full-time responsibilities and the business, but I decided to leave during a pandemic. And when I posted that online, it was one of my most popular posts because people were like, okay, you're leaving now. But the reason I left is because of the opportunities that had started to present themselves during the pandemic. And even when it came time for me to really decide, okay, this is the best time to leave, I questioned it. I was like, I don't know that I'm going to pay out of pocket for benefits and all the other stuff that comes with really being a full-time entrepreneur. So I questioned it for a season. And then after running the numbers, it just made sense. And it was one of the best decisions that I could have made. But what's been so interesting during the pandemic with Black women in particular is burnout numbers are on the rise. And so when we talk about this new normal and self-care and what's coming up in my coaching sessions is I've had Black women say to me, I don't want to go back into the office because of everything that I experienced in the office as a Black woman. And as I was preparing for our conversation, Mariella, I'll just pull this up because I definitely wanted to make sure that I share it, is McKinsey and Company in their 2020 Women in the Workplace study, they actually said the workplace has always been worse for Black women. Black women are promoted more slowly than other groups of employees. They are less likely than women of other races and ethnicities to have their manager advocate for new opportunities for them. They have fewer interactions with senior leaders, which means they often don't get the sponsorship and advocacy they need to advance. Black women also deal with more day-to-day bias in their workplaces. They have their judgment questioned, and they hear demeaning remarks about themselves or people like them. Additionally, half of Black women are often onlys for their race, and Black women who are onlys are likely to feel scrutinized. So that's just the career stuff, right? That's not even the personal stuff. So during the pandemic and even now, these are some of the things that are coming up in my coaching sessions because it's balancing how do I take care of myself while I deal with all of this other stuff? And what clearly is it that I want during this new normal? Now that I've spent some time in this pandemic and I can see what I don't want. What is the path forward in terms of what is a win for me personally and professionally?
I love that. And I love that I'm sure we can talk for hours just about just even the term new normal, like normal for who, historically speaking, we haven't even been allowed at the table. We've had to check so many things at the door. So it's like, do we even want to try to make a like that? It just kind of is. It's a paradox, actually, in my opinion. So I would just love to hear you speak to how we can reframe this idea of it being a new normal, but where it is more inclusive and it's not like the effects of colonization keeping us behind.
Yeah. So when you say keeping us behind, what do you mean by keeping us behind?
Like, so for example, I have someone here who has written in the chat, any tips on fighting the persistent hater called imposter syndrome? So, and you also spoke to this, like, a lot of people actually today have been speaking about this, like, are we worthy? Of course we're worthy, but how do we show that we are worthy? How do we know that we are worthy? So I mean that, I'm from Los Angeles. I've seen, what Hollywood puts out there. And then I have to go be a Black woman in the world and be confronted with what Hollywood shows the world a Black woman is. And I have to break a lot of those barriers down. So that's what I mean a little bit about, to keep us back in the sense that we have more work to do to kind of, make sure this normal isn't going to stifle us.
Yeah. A big part of everything that we do is what we think and believe about ourselves and who we decide to give our power and confidence to. So while there are so many external barriers, at the end of the day, even in thinking about, do I deserve to be in the room? There are so many women who question, do I deserve to be in the room because of an imposter syndrome? You absolutely deserve to be in the room. So the question isn't necessarily, do I deserve to be in the room? It's what needs to happen so that I can get in the room. And we have to stop questioning our worth based on what somebody else defines as worthy. We have to believe that we are worthy and have the necessary conversations to make sure that people understand this is why we are worthy. And if you are not willing to accept my worthiness, I don't have to stay here. It is a choice. It is a choice. And because I have options, I will exercise them. We have to be okay with no longer staying in situations and environments where we are tolerated and no longer celebrated. And that's not even a pitch for entrepreneurship, because sometimes when I have these conversations, especially in my personal circles, it's people think that I'm pushing entrepreneurship. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but I do recommend and suggest that if you are in an environment, in a culture that makes you feel as if you are less than, if you keep coming to the table saying, I want to be promoted, and you have done everything that they've asked you to do to be promoted, and you still can't get a promotion, my question is, why would you stay?
Are you seeing more women, and particularly Black women, be more enthusiastic about starting their own businesses instead of asking for permission to sit at the table?
I have seen an increase in entrepreneurship, and research shows this, right? Not just the increase in entrepreneurship, but yes, with Black women. But I've also seen a lot of Black women who don't want the burden and the inconsistencies of entrepreneurship. I mean, it's sexy, it's trending, but when you don't have income coming in, then what?
That's real. That's
Yeah,
real. Thank you, Ericka.
you're
Okay,
welcome.
so just moving on into just some of the real life challenges that you've seen with the folks that you've worked with. As we are figuring out how to recalibrate, we are still in a global pandemic.
Mhm.
Lots of people are thinking of, pivoting careers or just rethinking their purpose. Can you highlight some challenges that you've seen some of your clients, or in general some women, go through during these times when it comes to the state of humanity right now and what to do with our skill set and our talents and our passion?
Yeah. What comes up a lot of times in my coaching sessions is basically asking, okay, Erica, so what steps do I need to take now? Like when I think about where I see myself next, what could you give me in terms of strategy? And I usually start with who's supporting you, because it doesn't matter whether we choose to stay in our current seat, pursue the next thing, stay within the organization, go external to the organization. Success is never a solo act. And so there is a level of support we just need personally and professionally. What that looks like, I would say professionally, is making sure that you have mentors, making sure that you have sponsors, making sure that you have coaches who can give you the advice and who can help you avoid the pitfalls and the mistakes that you might make on your own. I will also add to that, making sure that you invest in your social capital. A lot of times we will say, you know what, I just don't have time to network, or I just don't have time to go to an event. Well, a lot of those networking events that we would go to are now virtual. But, if you look at the org chart and say, basically, I am here, right? Who sits to the left of you? Who sits to the right of you? Who sits above you? Who sits below you? You could literally have coffee chats or reach out to people once a quarter. But at the end of the day, we find ourselves too many times needing to make a move and not having adequate support because we have not invested in the relationships over time. And then we look to make a withdrawal when we haven't made enough deposits. So it's imperative that we balance that social capital with strategy, but also making sure that we have the necessary support, both personally and professionally.
On our first session, we talked a lot about networking and just the importance of, how to do that mindfully, how to do that in the professional space and also in just personal. Let's talk about the importance of networking as, a lot of companies are thinking of staying remote or going hybrid or, being fully in the office. How can someone position themselves to continue to grow in that company if they might be seeing some, hybrid models happening, or, we're flipping the script and everyone's going back to the office. So we're in these really, big transitional moments. How can someone still, try to find their growth within the company?
Yeah, I would say finding your growth within the company a lot of times is easier than trying to navigate that externally, right? So inside of the company, I would recommend reaching out to individuals and having a conversation about change. Right? How has all of this change impacted you personally and professionally? I don't know of anyone who hasn't had to change, deal with change, and manage change since the pandemic started in 2020. If they're not in your line of business, if they don't work on your team, you can ask them based on where you sit. Can you tell me where the org is going strategically within the next 18 months to 3 years, and get a feel for maybe some seats that are in position now, but maybe will no longer be, because teams are still changing. They're still shifting, so to speak, and you want to get ahead of the curve. You want to literally manage your career like a business and present yourself as a solution. So as you're having these informal, informational conversations, you're planting seeds, you're asking the right questions, you're talking about yourself, and you can then decide, should I have another conversation? Should I be talking to someone else? Depending on the strength of that connection, can they introduce you to someone else? And also, who can we introduce them to? Any relationship without reciprocity dies. So it can't always be, I'm coming to the table with an ask, this is how I can gain, but what are you also giving as a result of that relationship, so that it's balanced? Because at any point in time, we really should be able to give someone a resume or send a text or send a direct message and say, hey, you know what? I'm interested in blank role. Who should I be sending my information to? And is there anyone you can introduce me to? And you feel comfortable enough to do that because of the relationship, and they feel comfortable enough to put their stamp on you.
I love that. You said any relationship without reciprocity dies. That's great. Put that on a t-shirt. That's real.
Well, let me tell you, I can't do that. Well, I shouldn't say I can't do that, but I got it from someone else. So please don't think it's me. Bishop T.D. Jakes said that in a commitment sermon many years ago, and it stuck with me. And I was like, that is so real. Any relationship without reciprocity will eventually die.
And it's great to look at it that way, because otherwise we just want to take, or the opposite. We give, and then we experience burnout and we have this, crisis that happens. But it's great to see relationships as a two-way street, that it is a partnership. You are not a slave to anyone. You know, no is a full sentence. You can say no, you can leave at any point. Of course, the importance of networking and building your community so that when you do need to, hopefully you don't need to do it last minute, but if you do, you can pull some cards. There's that reciprocity piece that's there. And, you know, hopefully it will, the flow will be a little more fluid. So I really appreciate that. And actually, speaking of, you know, interviewing and sending resumes and things like that, I'd love to just highlight this question that was submitted previous. I'm heading into an interview with a recruiter next week. How should I handle questions about preference for a hybrid, remote, on-site role?
So let me first say congratulations that you have an interview. I get so excited when people start interviewing. In terms of how you handle preference, that really is a personal preference, right? So if the recruiter is saying to you, we have hybrid or we have on-site, what is your preference? If you're open to both, say that. If you're not, then let them know that you prefer to work remotely and here are the reasons why. But I would back those reasons up with performance metrics that you have been able to produce since the start of the pandemic.
I love that. And I love that you actually brought a piece to share. Any like relevant data or just like pieces that have just stuck out in your mind in the past 18 plus months that you want to give voice to. I know specifically we have found that, let me just find this here. Yeah. Per our data here, 9.5% more Black women have been unemployed during this time compared to any other community. You know, so just interested to see what your thoughts are on that, just percentage wise, and if there's any other data or, you know, research that has come out in this time that has fed the work that you do and also that can keep us encouraged.
Yeah, so I would say that's a two-part question. I have seen a lot of data that's come out because these women in the workplace reports continue to populate. Lean In did a study. I mentioned, excuse me, the McKinsey study. KPMG is always doing women in leadership studies. So we continue to see the impacts of not just women in the workplace, but what specifically is happening with Black women in the workplace. In terms of encouraging, I would say, oh, there's something in the chat. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Let me focus and then I'll go back to the chat. I would say I created well over 2 years ago a free course, how to communicate with confidence and credibility. So when you talk about the number of Black women who've been impacted because of unemployment, I create free resources because when people can't pay, I still want them to excel at work and know their worth. So I encourage anyone who may need that to just visit confidentcareerwoman.com, enroll in how to communicate with confidence and credibility and enhance your interviewing skills. Also, I've been really intentional with my content throughout the pandemic. So for example, my podcast, I've been displaced now, shares job search strategies as well as self-care strategies for those who are facing unemployment. So I would say that in terms of encouragement, that's where my content flows from, equipping, empowering, and encouraging. And the stats just continue to come. I'd be curious to see where we are 12 months from now as it pertains to unemployment, because some of the unemployment is by choice. Not all of these women are being displaced or being laid off or being terminated. A lot of what I'm seeing, especially in my coaching sessions, is this is by choice based on what they are experiencing personally. And then the flip side of that, by force, meaning not necessarily a displacement or a termination by the employer. There are some women in this country who cannot work remotely because of the nature of the work that they do. So, for example, when you have women who worked in restaurants, for example, how are they supposed to work remotely when they wait tables for a living? If they have children at home or caregiving responsibilities, what does that leave for them? So they've had to say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to come into work. I'm going to have to be able to find something else. And that something else could for them be entrepreneurship.
Mm. Yeah, lots of stories, you know, from lived experiences, so complex, so diverse. And so I appreciate you reminding us, that it is actually a privilege to be able to take your stuff online and still, be able to swim through, I shouldn't say swim through, but get through these times, because there are lots of people in the world who have not had that option. So to be mindful of that and to find a way to pay it forward, leave the door open, send the elevator back down, knowing that we have this privilege, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I want to just highlight something, a comment here from Pam, before you were speaking about, whether to stay or whether to go, why people are leaving, and all that jazz. So Pam writes, I think the staying there is due to the story we tell that if I leave, then they win. If we
Mm.
leave, then nothing changes. But if we stay, then we can be a part of changing the culture, exposing the gaps, right? Or is this wishful thinking? What do you think, Ericka?
Well, I feel like sometimes staying comes with a cost. And the question is, what are you willing to pay? And what are you willing to gain? My experience personally, and with the women that I coach, a lot of them is the win oftentimes ends up being for the employer, and we end up self-sacrificing as a result. And that self-sacrifice could be time with our kids, time with those we love. It could be not being paid fairly. It could be health concerns due to the stress associated with the demands of the yes that we've given. So I do get what she's saying, right? If I do not go, what happens? But is that also to a degree, and this may not be the case for the person who posed the question, a part of this superwoman syndrome that so many of us have, where we feel like if we don't do it, who else will? We have to put our cape on to save the world. I started telling people, especially in my personal circle, probably about 2 years ago, Jesus died, so he sacrificed so I wouldn't have to. Y'all are not gonna kill me. Here's some boundaries. I love you all. I will do what I can to help you. But even on a plane, they tell me, put my oxygen mask on before I go and try to save other people. I want to save you. I want to help you, but I want to help myself in the process too. And coming from someone who is such an advocate of self care, and someone who perpetuated this vicious cycle of neglect and wearing herself out and overcommitting, hitting the wall and exhaustion, we have to be okay with, yes, we will help, we will give, but not at the expense of ourselves and our well-being.
Woo. Yes, yes, yes. That's a great note to end this conversation on. Real talk. You've been so uplifting just with your encouraging words and just the reality of the work that you've been able to do, in these past big shifting years. So thank you so much, Ericka, for the work that you're doing. Remind us how we can continue to talk with you when we finish this conversation, because we got about 1 minute left.
Oh, time flies. Okay. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Confident Career Woman, or Ericka Spradley. You can visit my website, erickaspradley.com, or you can visit my online course platform to take advantage of some of those free resources at confidentcareerwoman.com. And lastly, if you're interested in joining conversations that lead to compensation for $10 a month, I'm on patreon.com as well.
Awesome. I love that. Well, congratulations on all of the things. It's always a
Thank
pleasure to
you.
chat with you. Good luck with everything. And you and I have some connections to do afterwards. So I look forward to
Yes,
that.
we
Thank you,
do.
Ericka.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Have a good day, everyone.